My name is Sarah, and for most of my life, I considered myself an afterthought in my own family. I wasn't the perfect child like my sister, Lily. She always got the best treatment from our parents, especially Dad. My parents adored her. She was their golden girl, their shining star, and I was just, well, there. I was always the one who was overlooked, the one who had to fight for attention. But when it came down to it, Lily wasn't the only one who made me feel small. My parents weren't innocent either. Over the years, things started to feel more and more unfair. I could see the favoritism in everything. From the lavish birthday parties Lily got to the expensive vacations they took her on while I stayed home. I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt. But it wasn't just the small things. It was the way they acted like I didn't exist when it mattered. It was the times I worked hard for my own goals, only to have them dismissed by Dad as a phase, or the times Lily would mess up and still be given everything she wanted. No consequences. It all hit a breaking point one afternoon, though, when I learned something that changed everything. It was a discovery I wasn't expecting, one that pushed me to the edge. It wasn't just that my sister had taken everything from me for years, this time it was my parents. They had betrayed me in the most unexpected way. I was going through my parents' paperwork after they had asked me to help with some spring cleaning, a task I had reluctantly agreed to. Little did I know that this would be the moment I would stumble upon a document that shattered everything I knew: a will. I wasn't surprised when I saw my name on it, but what really caught me off guard was the rest of it. The assets, the house, the savings. It was all left to Lily. Lily, the one who could do no wrong. The one who could do whatever she pleased while I was left to pick up the pieces. How could they? How could they leave everything to her knowing how much I had sacrificed for them? That moment, holding that will in my hands, was the moment I realized I had been taken advantage of for too long. It was time for payback. And trust me, I wasn't about to let this go quietly. Growing up, I was always the quieter, more reserved one in the family. I had my own interests, my own friends, and I wasn't as loud or as outgoing as Lily. But that never mattered. My parents, especially Dad, saw Lily as the perfect child. She excelled at everything: sports, academics, even socializing. People adored her, and my parents couldn't have been prouder. In their eyes, she could do no wrong. And then there was me. I was the good enough one. Not perfect, not the best, but just there. I wasn't the first one to be picked for team activities or leadership roles, and I wasn't the one who got the accolades and praise from teachers or coaches. While Lily's room was filled with trophies and awards, mine was barely decorated with a couple of photos. But what hurt more than all of that wasn't the outward recognition. It was the way my parents treated me when it mattered most. There were countless times I would come home from school or work, excited about an accomplishment I had achieved, only to be met with a polite nod, a quick, "good job," and then their focus would immediately shift to Lily. It was as if nothing I did could ever be celebrated, as if I was just another person in the background. I worked hard for everything I had, but it never seemed to be enough. Lily, on the other hand, had everything handed to her. I remember the time she failed a major exam, one that I had worked so hard for, and my parents' response wasn't what I expected. Rather than reprimanding her or giving her a talking to about responsibility, they comforted her, explained how she was stressed, and promised to hire a tutor for her. The same semester, I had aced my exam and received nothing more than a good job with a pat on the back. It was that moment that I started to realize how deeply the imbalance went. I had long been used to the subtle jabs and side glances from my parents. It was in the little things, like the way they never took my advice when I tried to contribute to family discussions, or how they would overlook me when it came time to plan trips or make decisions about the family business. They would always consult Lily first, as if I wasn't even part of the equation. I used to think it was just because I was younger, or maybe I wasn't as talented, but deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't the favored one. And it wasn't just my parents that hurt me, it was Lily too. While my parents put me in the background, Lily took advantage of it. She would always play the sweet, innocent little sister role whenever it suited her. If I ever tried to stand up for myself, she would act hurt and accuse me of being jealous or bitter. Of course, no one believed me. She always had a way of making people feel sorry for her. And when it came to family matters, she was the one who had all the influence. The final straw came during a family meeting about the family business. It was something I had worked hard for since I was a teenager, helping my parents build and run a small but successful company. I poured my time into it. But when it came time for us to discuss the future of the business, my parents didn't even consider me as a viable partner. They didn't even mention my name when discussing who would take over. Instead, they looked to Lily and started planning her future in the business, completely disregarding the fact that I had spent years helping them build it from the ground up. It was like a slap in the face. And that was when I truly realized that the years of neglect and favoritism were finally taking their toll. My resentment had been building for so long, and I was finally reaching my breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when I had been treated like a shadow in my own family. I had to get control of my life, my future, and my dignity back. But how? How could I possibly get back what had always been taken from me? How could I stand up to a family that had consistently let me down for years? It was in that moment, after that disastrous meeting, that I decided I wasn't going to let this go any longer. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. If I wanted what was rightfully mine, I would have to fight for it. And I had the perfect plan. I knew the only way I would ever get my fair share was through some kind of strategy. I needed to plan my move carefully, so I began paying closer attention to everything, every conversation, every small detail. What I had originally dismissed as mere neglect started to reveal itself as an intricate web of manipulation and favoritism. It started with small things. I began overhearing conversations between my parents and Lily when they thought I wasn't around. They spoke about the future of the family business, and every time, it was Lily's name they mentioned. My father would talk about how Lily was just the right fit for the company, or how she understood the business better than anyone else. The more I listened, the more it became clear that they had already made their decision. They had their minds set on her. I tried to dismiss my feelings of bitterness and frustration, telling myself that maybe they were just being supportive of her. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. They were actively grooming her to take everything from me, and I couldn't sit back and let it happen. It was time to get smart. That's when I started researching. I spent days going through old family records, financial statements, and documents that had been left in various drawers of the house. It was strange, really. I had never thought to look through my family's business papers before, but now I was doing it out of necessity. I needed to know exactly what was going on behind closed doors. And that's when I found it. I was leafing through a set of tax returns from the past couple of years when I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. There, buried beneath a stack of papers, was an official-looking document that I had never seen before. It was a financial agreement that detailed the transfer of a significant portion of the company's assets into Lily's name. My heart raced as I read through it. This wasn't just a will or a simple inheritance plan. This was a deliberate, carefully executed transfer of assets that would leave me with nothing. I was in shock. How could they do this to me? How could my own parents betray me like this? I had worked my entire life for this, and they were just handing it all to Lily as though I was invisible. It felt like a knife to the heart, but I wasn't about to let this slide. I needed leverage, and I knew where to get it. Lily had always been so certain of her position, arrogant even. She'd always assumed that the family would back her no matter what. And this, I realized, was her fatal flaw. She thought she had everything in the bag. She wasn't even aware that I was onto her, which made everything so much easier for me. I started gathering more evidence, piecing together my plan. I knew I needed something big to expose her, something that would shatter the perfect image she had built up in front of our parents. I wasn't going to let her take everything from me without a fight. This wasn't just about money. This was about dignity. This was about getting back what was rightfully mine and showing my parents and sister that I wasn't as weak as they thought. I started noticing the little things, the careless mistakes Lily made when it came to managing the family's finances. Small oversights that she never thought anyone would catch. But I did. I made a list, took notes, and began tracking the inconsistencies. The most glaring mistake came when she tried to transfer a sum of money from the family account into her personal account for business expenses. But the transfer wasn't authorized. She'd used the wrong signature and the transaction had bounced. I kept that information to myself, but I knew it was a huge mistake. But that wasn't all. I also began to notice how Lily's involvement in the business was less about actual work and more about image. She would throw around big ideas, talk a lot about future growth, but never actually do any of the heavy lifting. It wasn't her passion for the company. It was her desire to claim what she felt entitled to. This wasn't just an inheritance for her. This was power, control, and validation. The more I observed her, the more I realized that she wasn't just arrogant. She was careless. She didn't realize how many cracks were beginning to show in her perfect facade. Every day, she grew more confident, assuming that her position was unshakable. And the more confident she became, the more careless she got. And I knew that was when I had her. I didn't act immediately. I took my time, knowing that revenge would only be sweet if it was carefully executed. I spent the next few weeks quietly setting things up, gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment. But it wasn't until I overheard a conversation between my parents and Lily that I knew the time had come. I was sitting in the kitchen, pretending to read a book, when I heard Dad say something that made my blood run cold. He said, "We've already made up our minds, Lily. It's all set. You'll take over the company and everything will be yours. Sarah will have to understand that this is the way it's meant to be." It was the final nail in the coffin. They had already made the decision. And now, it was my turn to make mine. The plan was in motion, and it was time to execute. I had gathered all the evidence I needed: the financial discrepancies, the unauthorized transfers, the hidden agreements, and the careless mistakes Lily had made. I had waited for weeks, studying her every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. It wasn't going to be enough to just confront her quietly. No, I needed to expose her in front of everyone. My parents, my friends, anyone who had ever believed that Lily could do no wrong. I needed to take back what was mine, and I needed to make sure it was clear that I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. The perfect opportunity came one evening during a family dinner. My parents had invited Lily and me over to discuss the future of the family business. Again, I knew this meeting was going to be different. This time I would be in control. I had everything ready. I had printed out copies of the financial documents, the unauthorized transactions, the proof of Lily's reckless behavior with the family money. I couldn't wait any longer. We sat down at the dinner table, the conversation starting as usual. My parents, glowing with pride, began discussing how everything was falling into place for Lily to take over the business. "Lily's been working so hard," my dad said with a proud smile. "She's the perfect person to run things." I stayed quiet, letting them talk. They hadn't even acknowledged me yet. But that was exactly what I wanted. The longer they ignored me, the more I could see how badly they had misjudged me. They thought I would just sit back and accept their decision. Then, when the time was right, I spoke. "It's funny you mention that," I said, my voice calm, but with a hint of coldness that made both my parents and Lily pause. "Because I've been going through some of the family's financial documents." The room went silent. Lily shot me a look, one of disbelief mixed with annoyance. She knew she was caught, but she tried to cover it up like she always did. "What are you talking about, Sarah?" my mother asked, her voice tight, clearly caught off guard. I didn't hesitate. I slid the documents across the table one by one. "These," I said, "are the financial agreements, tax returns, and bank statements. The ones you never thought I'd look at. I found out about the assets you transferred to Lily, without my knowledge, without my consent." The shock on their faces was priceless. My mother's hand trembled as she picked up the papers, flipping through them in disbelief. My father's face reddened with anger, but not toward me. No, he was angry at himself for being exposed. Lily's smug expression faltered as she realized what was happening. She knew her perfect image was crumbling. She tried to speak, to explain herself, but the words caught in her throat. This is all a mistake," she stammered. "I didn't do anything wrong." But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to let her off that easy. "Oh, it's not just that," I continued. "I also found out about the unauthorized transfer of funds from the company account into your personal account, Lily. A transaction that you tried to cover up by using the wrong signature. You thought no one would notice, didn't you?" Lily's face drained of color as the room stared at her in shock. My parents looked at her as if they were seeing her for the first time. She tried to defend herself, but the evidence was irrefutable. The truth was right there in front of them, and there was no escaping it. "You've been lying to us," my father finally said, his voice low and disappointed. "All this time, we thought you were working hard for the business. But it was all about securing your future, wasn't it?" Lily's shoulders slumped, and for the first time in her life, I saw fear in her eyes. She was no longer the golden child. She wasn't the one in control anymore. It was my turn now. "You've made a huge mistake, Lily," I said, my voice icy. "You thought I wouldn't fight back, but I'm not the weak, invisible sister you've always treated me like. I'm done being your doormat, and now I'm taking back what's mine." I turned to my parents, my gaze steady and unwavering. "And you? How could you let this happen? How could you betray me like this, give everything to her, and leave me with nothing? You've treated me like I didn't matter, but I do matter, and you're going to have to live with the consequences of your actions." The room was silent for what felt like an eternity, but I didn't care. The weight of the moment was heavy, and the power was in my hands. I had won. The aftermath of that dinner was a whirlwind of emotions. My parents were devastated, mostly by their own actions. The guilt was written all over their faces as they tried to process the reality of what had just unfolded. They had thought they could just hand everything to Lily without ever considering me, without ever realizing the consequences of their neglect. But now, they had to face the truth. Lily, on the other hand, was a different story. She went from being the golden child to a desperate, broken version of herself. The arrogance she once wore like armor was completely gone. She was a wreck. There was no denying that the things I had exposed were undeniable. And as much as she tried to backpedal, she couldn't escape the consequences. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. My parents tried to make excuses for her, but deep down they knew they had messed up. They knew they couldn't just sweep it all under the rug. Lily's reputation, once so carefully crafted, was shattered. My father's disappointment in her was palpable, and my mother was too ashamed to even look me in the eye. Lily's attempts to salvage the situation were pathetic. She begged for forgiveness, tried to downplay her actions, and even made empty promises to fix everything. But I wasn't having it. I had spent my entire life watching her get away with things I could only dream of doing. She had played the victim when she was the one who had been deceiving everyone. I wasn't interested in her apologies anymore. She had crossed a line, and I was done. As for me, I took control of the situation in a way that made it clear I wasn't going to back down. I worked with the legal team to ensure that my rightful share of the family business would be restored to me. I had the proof, the documentation, and the support of those who knew what had really happened behind closed doors. In the end, the business was split more fairly, and I was finally given the respect and recognition I had long deserved. But more than that, I finally had the peace of mind I had been searching for. The feeling of taking control back, of standing up for myself after years of being overlooked and underappreciated, was more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. I didn't need to be the golden child. I just needed to be recognized for the person I was. Lily, on the other hand, wasn't so fortunate. The damage to her reputation was irreversible. Her once untouchable position in the family business crumbled, and no matter how much she begged or tried to mend things, she was left with nothing. The family no longer trusted her, and she had no one to turn to. My parents, broken by their own mistakes, didn't know how to fix what had been broken between us. They couldn't take back what they had done. As for me, I thrived. I moved forward with my life and my business, knowing that I had done the right thing. I had fought for what was mine, and in the end, I came out victorious. I didn't need the approval of my parents or my sister anymore. I had my own life, my own future, and it was bright. And as for Lily, well, she learned the hard way that you can't take everything from someone and expect them to just accept it. Sometimes people fight back, sometimes the quiet one, the one you think is weak, comes out on top. I didn't just take back what was mine, I took control of my future. And that was something no one could ever take from me again.